It has been an arduous 3-year wait for Aces of Thunder on PSVR2. From delays to people thinking the game wouldn't even come out to months of radio silence. But now it's finally here. The game comes out tomorrow on February 3rd and I'm here to tell you my thoughts on it in this review. This game had so much riding on it, and I was actually quite nervous booting it up for the first time in case something had gone catastrophically wrong. I'm glad to say that's not the case, and Aces of Thunder, well, there's no other way to say this. It's the real deal. If you've been living under a rock for the last 3 years and haven't heard of this game somehow, it's a War Thunder spin-off, which is a flat screen and also PCVR multiplayer and single player war game, which mixes tanks and planes and boats. But Aces just focuses on the planes, at least for the player side of things, with 29 aircraft to choose from across countless theatres of war. Before we dive into the gameplay and what I think of it, because I have so much to gush over and a couple of problems, but they are very nitpicky compared to how bloody good this game is, let's talk the PSVR2 port. This is a bit of a weird one to talk about because visually, the game is pretty great. It's quite sharp, but there is noticeable aliasing on close-up objects. Now, the good news about this is, when you're flying, you don't really notice this at all. The game, and especially your airplane models, look unreal. Running 90 native as well, so no reprojection means the world is smooth and stands out. I'm unsure if there's any PS5 Pro upgrade because I don't have one, but I wasn't told anything before launch about that, so I would hazard to say no, but I could be wrong. When you boot up the game in the initial starting environment, everything is quite shimmery and aliasy. The edges of objects don't look that great. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but it's not amazing. Luckily, the game gets this worst impression to you immediately and then does away with it as soon as you get up into the air, because this game does look stunning once you're properly in it and flying about. So don't worry if you boot up the game and think it looks a bit lackluster from that starting environment. Just the aliasing in there, you're in for a treat when you actually start flying, so it's okay. There's good colours on the OLED panels, the game looks very vibrant, and during darker scenes I couldn't see too much mirror, although I gotta admit, I'm not a person who gets affected by mirror very much. I don't know whether it's my PSVR2 unit was just a lucky one, or it just doesn't really bother me personally, but I can't say it took me out of the experience too much. Weirdly though, as a PSVR2 port, at least in our review build, there weren't any PSVR2 features included here, aside from, I'm guessing, eye track foveated rendering for helping with performance. What I mean by this is that there's no rumble in the controllers or in the headset, and this is really odd to me because you could have rumble when pushing the throttle forward, feeling the rumble of the plane. Your pilot can also get killed through the canopy, and it's kind of hard to tell when that happens, aside from the glass shattering sound. So a bit of headset rumble wouldn't have been amiss there. I think the worst offender for it though is that there are some planes with 2-stage triggers, so if you half press you'll fire your machine guns, and if you full press you'll fire your larger weaponry and cannons. This would have been the perfect time to implement adaptive triggers to have it so halfway press feels different to a full press. Currently it doesn't, because these features just aren't implemented. With that being said though, this sounds worse than it is because I'm starting this review off with the PSVR2 build, whereas the game itself is utterly fantastic. So these are kind of nitpicks. As soon as you get up in the air, you don't really notice it unless you're focusing on these things being missing, because the game is that intense. That being said though, I do hope these features get added in. The game does have full trophies with a platinum, so if you're a trophy hunter, you will have some fun chasing down the last ones that you need. Also happy to report that with my time with the game, I ran into no bugs, no glitches, no hitches in frame rate. It was a solid 90 all the way through and no crashes with Aces of Thunder. So working very good in terms of stability. Okay, that's it with the PSVR2 port. Let's talk the game itself because I'm dying to get into this. Aces of Thunder is a sim through and through with its handling and its flight models. It is realistic, it's easy to stall planes, you've got to be managing your throttle all the time. Your pilot can start to black out due to G-forces. There's a ton of options in the menus for adjusting everything, all your inputs that you want. You can even go as far as to pull back the canopy of the aircraft on lookout if you'd like to. It even extends as far as having the canopy be harder to close during flight than open because of the air resistance. Super cool stuff. That's about as far as the VRAF interactions go though. You can't really mess with any other switches or toggles in the cockpit. It's just your stick and your throttle. And also putting up your gear at the start of a run if the mission requires it. All of the instruments in the cockpit do work and actually have functionality though, which is incredible, meaning you don't need any other HUD. The only other HUD in the game is when you're looking at a friendly aircraft, it'll have a friendly indicator and the online gamer tag if applicable. Planes from afar, if you're not looking directly at them, don't have friendly indicators, so you'll have to basically get in line of sight to ensure if they're friendly or enemy. Part of me does wish we could have interacted with a lot more in the cockpit, even if they weren't functional and actually affected the plane. But at the same time, I understand why not, because when you've got motion controls and you're trying to reach for the throttle and there are a bunch of other levers around it or toggles around it, I understand not wanting to mess up that input by having them also interactable. But part of me feels it's a missed opportunity, part of me fully understands. Now, I actually found it better to not use the motion controls for Aces of Thunder. I used the sticks. You can also use the Hotas 4 and the rudder on PSVR2 if you have those. You can use the Hotas on its own or with the rudder paired with it. But as I said, I actually stuck to the DualSense and the sticks on the Sense controllers. So the DualSense works fairly well. You do have to go into your settings and manually switch to the DualSense. If you're using that, same with the Hotas, it doesn't automatically switch from one input to the other, so you will have to go and change that yourself in the settings menu. But my order of usefulness for the 3 inputs that I actually tried were the sticks on the Sense controllers, then the DualSense, and then the motion controls, at least for controlling the aircraft. Because you're not really holding on to anything, the motion controls are just quite difficult to get precisely down, and I didn't really find them that fun because of it. Sure, they're more immersive, but even for single player, it was hard to dogfight and line up bombing runs with controls that felt quite inconsistent to handle. The sticks, though, feel great. The flight model, for me, feels identical to War Thunder, so you'll feel at home if you've played that game. But please be advised, this isn't really that much of an arcade flight game. You will be punished for reckless maneuvers, and it's quite easy to lose control of the plane if you're a new player, like I did many, many times. The game does have all aircraft unlocked from the start, so you can jump in and use any of them. There are 29 altogether, but there are 5 DLC aircraft. They all have a little purchase icon on them, like the Hurricane for the British faction. I don't know how much these are going to cost. I believe the game's base price will be $30 from what I'm hearing. It's about 22 gigabytes in size as well, but I don't know how much those DLC planes will cost. I don't think there's any DLC coming post-launch from what I hear, but there are these planes to purchase from the start. The good thing is, though, you can test flight these planes before you buy them. So you can fly around, see how they handle, see what their weapons are like, see what loadouts you can take, which is great to see. In this test/free flight environment, which you can hop into at any time, you'll be able to test the limits of all your planes, and each test flight environment is different for each country. So the Brits are over England, the Japanese are in Okinawa, Russians are kind of in the Tiger, Germany is in Germany, etc. It's really cool that they had that attention to detail, and that's my main thing here, is attention to detail is very, very high in Aces of Thunder. Again, like the instruments working in the cockpit, being able to pull the canopy over, your wing and airframe flexing as you take harsh maneuvers, your wings even being able to come off if you stress them too much, leading you into a death spiral towards the ground. Some planes also have other members in the cockpit with you, or somewhere else in the plane. For example, one of the British planes, I forget which one, it might be the Typhoon. It's not the Typhoon, it's one of them, basically has a second pilot in there with you in the other seat. He's a little bit unnerving, but he's a pretty chill guy. My favourite, though, was during one of the bombing missions on both the airbase and the train station, where you have an AI tail gunner. So if somebody gets on your tail, you can turn around and watch your gunner try and take them out. Such a super immersive feature to have, and just made it feel like a real war, a real dogfight. That's the biggest compliment that I can hand to Aces, is that it doesn't make you feel like the main character. It makes you feel like you're fighting for your life, and that's exactly what I wanted. There's a lot to love here in terms of how much detail is put into the flight models and how they're represented in virtual reality. I do wish the instruments in the plane, though, were eye-tracked, because if you look directly at them, it'll tell you what they are with text, but it's a little hard to get that lined up to the instrument that you want sometimes, and I just wish they'd used eye tracking to make it so whatever you're looking at with your eyes, you'd see the name of that instrument, if that makes sense. Still, though, great that it all works. We talked a little bit about the flight models then and touched on the damage models, but let me expand on that a little bit. The damage models in Aces of Thunder are utterly fantastic. Getting shot at and seeing bits of your wing go flying off, having shots come through the canopy and being able to kill you, being able to careen your plane into an aircraft carrier to deal damage, or crashing into another plane mid-flight and having your propellers bend inwards and break, leading you to crash into the sea. Oh,
Oh, fuck! Oh my god, your wings off! Holy shit! I'm gonna crash into you! Holy fuck! Oh my god!
Oh my god, that is trippy as heck!
That was terrifying. Are you still crashing? Oh my god, I'm stalling. Wait, I did crash into you! I did crash into you! My front propeller's broken, I'm crashing!
Every consequence for every action you could take in a plane ends up exactly how you'd expect it to. Minor damage to your airframe can lead you to lean to one side, which means you have to micromanage your flight even more, but losing a wing entirely is catastrophic to you. And it's difficult, it truly is. It's a sim at heart. I think the epitome of this attention to detail to the damage models though is with the landing gear and flaps. I was coming in to land and I pulled down the landing gear, and because I was going too fast, I hadn't reduced my airspeed enough. My landing gear simply snapped off. My Spitfire no longer had wheels at the bottom. I looked behind me and they were flying off into the distance. That's the level of detail we're talking about here, and if you play War Thunder, you won't be surprised. But it's good that it's carried over from that game to this one. Okay, we're going to get into the mission structure in a second, but first I want to talk about the combat itself, because that's what makes up the crux of this game. Dogfighting is the best it's ever felt in a VR game for me, even more so than Ace Combat 7, I would say. There's something very visceral about not having any markers, any HUD on enemy aircraft, just having to frantically look around to see if you can spot them and track them and get a shot lined up. It's something truly special. It's immersive as hell. It feels like the equivalent of going into Gran Turismo 7 and turning all your HUD off and racing that way. I'm so glad that the Aces team did stick to their guns and create a pretty much HUD-less experience, because it's all the better for it. You do have a little map on your knee to the bottom left, which shows you enemy targets, but it's at such a zoomed out level, it's more of just like an open map of your area of engagement, so it's not really used for tracking enemy targets. It's more just for leading you to your mission area and your next objective. Whether it's in single player or the custom game and multiplayer that we tried out, dogfighting has never felt so good in VR. It is just a visceral, terrifying experience. Hearing shots ricochet off your airframe, getting a gun run finally lined up, or pulling off a dive bomb is such pure satisfaction. And this would be awesome in the flat, but in VR it's just next level. That being said, you can play this in flat as well. The controls are a little bit weird on DualSense, but yeah, it is possible. I did do it for a little bit, but if you have a VR headset, there's just no point. VR is the way to go. Some of the effects just have to be seen in VR to be believed, like shooting down an enemy aircraft that's close in front of you will lead to the fuel, the oil, and the debris spraying off the back of their aircraft and hitting your canopy and sticking to it for a time. That's the level we're talking about. Okay, let's talk missions and what you'll be actually playing here. So for single player, you have 14 single player missions, which can be tackled in any order and replayed, and they don't give you a grade or a pass after you've done them. They're just there to do whenever you want. You've got 9 single player war tales, which to be honest are kind of the same as single player missions. Both of them have dialogue before your mission starts, both of them have an objective to do, and both of them have a new environment for you to fight in, of which there are a lot in this game. But the 9 single player war tales only can be done in order, so you complete one and then the next one unlocks and you have a little marker showing that you've done them when you have. These can vary from the Battle of Midway, trying to bomb the Hiryu, defending Pearl Harbor, defending the bombers going to bomb Normandy, searching for a missing tank squadron in Africa, or taking out a German train station as the Russians. Most of the time you're not just in a straight dogfight, although you can actually set one of those up for yourself if you'd like to. I'll touch on that in a second. But these main structured missions always have you doing something different, and that's super appreciated. They're not that long though, they last from 10 to 20 minutes. And what's interesting about the missions is that because this is a sim and not an arcade game, it's not always up to you. Take the hunt for the Hiryu, for example, trying to hunt down the Japanese aircraft carrier. I landed one good bombing hit on the carrier itself, but then missed my next 2. But we still won because my team, the rest of my squadron, who are all AI, they managed to get a few more hits in and we sunk the carrier. It puts you in these realistic World War II battles where it's not down to you whether you win or lose, you just try your best to survive and complete the objective. Some people like myself are really going to love that, the fact that it makes you feel like a cog in the machine, rather than, say, Trigger from Ace Combat 7, where everything's kind of up to you. But some people won't like that, the fact that you don't have that much agency in the battles. Me personally though, I really like it. Finally, for single player, you also have a custom mission editor, so you can put together the battle that you want, the length, amount of fuel, limited ammo, where you want to be, and this is fully customizable. So after you've done the single player missions, of which overall there are 23, you can then go on and make your own custom missions with the editor. It's not really an in-depth editor where you get to place assets or anything, but you do get to set up the parameters that you fight in and what you're doing, which is really cool to see. So that is your single player portion of the game, but there also is multiplayer. And unfortunately, I can't really comment on the matchmaking here because I didn't really get to try it. I did search a couple of nights. I've only had the game for 3 days, and yeah, I just couldn't get into a game. But me and Reese from Games with T, I'll link him down below. He'll also be covering Aces. We got together and did some multiplayer. That'll be its own video, probably tomorrow. But I do want to talk about it a bit now because multiplayer just takes this game up to 11. Even with the 1v1 that we did, it was so much fun to just dogfight in the air, watch each other splash into the ocean when we got shot, crashing our planes into each other. It was genuinely just a brilliant, brilliant time. And I would heartily recommend this game for single player and multiplayer, whether you want one or the other. This game will probably be populated. It's crossplay with Steam, from what I understand, crossplay with the flat screen, because you can play it in flat or VR. You shouldn't really struggle to find a game, especially at launch. So I would say jump in for either of them. Single player will always be there for you, but multiplayer is so much fun. And if you've got some friends you can jump in and play together with, that's going to be an amazing experience. So me and T, we play custom games. I would say there are about 10 multiplayer scenarios called operations where you have to either defend ground targets or attack a certain objective. This was a little bit weird. So we both loaded in on the same side. I enabled bots in the lobby. And how this works is you start on the ground, so you take off from a runway. However, the online operations seemed to end before we could take off. I'm not sure whether the ground targets would just kill each other on their own and then the whole scenario would end, but we barely got off the ground and it would take us back to the menu because we either won or we lost, which was really, really weird. I don't know what's going on with that. Maybe that'll work better with a full lobby with custom games. I'm assuming these scenarios were not really intended for 2 people, but that was our experience with that. But when we went into the point capture modes, of which there were 4 maps, 4 different scenarios for that, that worked great. So we then had a 1v1, and it was simply so much fun. Some of the best moments I've ever had in VR, I'm going to be honest. Frantically looking for each other in the sky and trying to take shots at each other. It seriously just has to be experienced to feel how great it is. The Aces team have made something truly special here. I cannot state that enough in this review. This is the real deal. This is the flight game we have been waiting for, and this paired with Microsoft Flight Simulator will mean I am probably set forever in terms of flight games on PSVR2. But yeah, those custom games only have point capture and operations at the moment. I would say maybe 10 operations and 4 point capture. That's kind of the split that we're looking at, and you can choose whichever one you want and what parameters are applied. Okay, so I'm going to do a little Q&A section in a second, but first I want to talk about probably my biggest grievance with the game that actually annoys me from day to day, and that is the menu. Now, when they revealed the menu, it was a great idea. It's a little tablet that you hold and you actually press each tab that you want. You can select your planes there, select your modes. It works with the bigger buttons. It's fine with the bigger buttons, but with the smaller inputs, it's super hard to get it precisely. It needs a pointer or something so you don't actually have to press your finger into the menu, which is how it currently is. It's not too bad again for selecting game modes and stuff, but it was quite infuriating when I went into the menu to adjust inputs. Let me give you an example. So upon launching the game, I found that I couldn't actually put my landing gear back down when I wanted to. The little lever on the side of the Spitfire just wouldn't do it. I don't know whether this is something that is in the real plane, so I had to kind of adjust something else for me to be able to put my landing gear down again. But I did find that there was an input for it in the menu. So I went over to the menu and I found the input was already mapped to both flaps and drop bombs. What was happening when I pressed this button was my flaps would deploy and the landing gear wouldn't go down. So that input just wasn't working for the landing gear on its own. So I then mapped it. Luckily, you can double map, so you can choose 2 inputs to do one thing. So I chose press L2 and square, and then I could deploy my landing gear, all good. However, the problem is, it was really finicky to do this. Because the buttons are quite small in the menu, I was just hitting the wrong input and pressing the wrong thing, and we need a pointer. We need a pointer for the menu, 100%. For a game that's gone through so much QA probably over the last 3 years, I don't really know how this input method ended up making it to the final build. It is just quite frustrating. The menu layout is also a little bit weird. For some reason, the multiplayer custom games are in the game mode section along with all the other single player stuff, whereas the actual multiplayer is just the big 2 battle button that you see there, which is a bit odd. As for your actual options, you can adjust your gamma, your nit brightness, basically all the HDR stuff, the PSVR2, very appreciated. Adjust your input as well. Again, you have to do that manually between your Hotas or your controllers. But there aren't really any comfort options because you're just sat in the plane. There's no vignetting or anything like that. The game comes as is. Okay, we're going to get onto our Q&A now, but overall, I'm so impressed with Aces of Thunder. My rule of thumb for the channel, really, or what I've noticed is that if my reviews are longer, then I really enjoy the game that I'm playing, and that is the case for this one. So I'll touch on it at the end again with my overall thoughts, but let's get on to the Q&A from you guys and answer your questions about the game in case I missed anything. We're going to start off with a YouTube comment. Is there crossplay in the settings for Aces? I didn't see any settings for crossplay. I'm assuming it's just enabled by default because no matter your input, you're going to be on a fairly level playing field here. So no, didn't see any crossplay settings. From what I know, it's just enabled by default. Is the PS5 Pro necessary for Aces? I haven't tried the Pro, so I can't say whether it's a massive improvement or it does nothing. But for me personally, the game runs great and looks pretty great on base PS5, so you'll be completely fine. From Grey Matter Shades, I'm curious about the quality and quantity of single-player content. I'm not into multiplayer, so is there enough that the game will be worthwhile, assuming I never jump into multiplayer? As somebody who played about an hour and a half of multiplayer in the last few days, but spent many hours in the single-player, you'll have a lot to do here with single-player. The amount of variation in the missions and the pure quantity of the content there, you'll be absolutely fine sticking to single-player. Avron VR GameCat has a couple of questions. Number one, can you dive bomb or gun strafe ships or ground targets? Yes, there are many missions dedicated to just this, and the online operations also have these too. The bombing run missions were some of my favourite, sticking my head out the window to see if I hit my target, especially the Wartail against the Hiryu, that was super cool. Can you fly against semi-challenging bot opponents where you want to fly like the Red Baron without human multiplayer? I found the bots were actually pretty good, to be honest. I'm not the best at flight sims, I have to be completely honest, so I did genuinely struggle against quite a few of these guys. Multiplayer will be on another level though, I imagine. But yeah, I think the single player gave me a fair bit of challenge. Are there difficulty settings to get super challenging combat veteran pilots too, or do we get stuck fighting newbie AI? I don't actually know about difficulty settings. I didn't really see anything too obvious in the menus, especially for the Wartail missions, you kind of just start and you're in. But again, I did find them fairly challenging, so I think you'll be fine. Owen Sparks says, can you use a Hotas and still manipulate in cockpit controls? Asking about hand tracking or picking up the DualSense or the Sense controllers. Basically, I'm going to answer this, no, you cannot, I'm pretty sure. So I don't have a Hotas, but the way that it worked with switching to the DualSense is that I went into the settings and swapped over the input entirely. So the Sense controllers, as soon as I swapped over to the DualSense, were no longer in the picture. They were no longer recognized in the game until I swapped back over, so I'm pretty sure you can't. Honestly though, I just stuck to the stick controls after a while, as I said, so I didn't really feel the loss of the Sense controllers that much. Corey2016 asked a question. I've answered most of this in the review aside from draw distances. Let me touch on that here. Draw distances are pretty damn good. They go for quite a while, and LOD here is also pretty great. If you're really low to the ground, you can see the LOD pop in 100%. There's a surprising amount of detail there, and the attention to detail in gameplay carries over there too. For example, if you crash your plane into the ground into a tree, the tree will also collapse, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, LOD, pretty good. It is noticeable if you're flying super low, but overall it does look brilliant. The planes in the distance are kind of black, dead pixels almost, until you get a little bit closer and then you can see the silhouette, but I was pretty impressed by the draw distance here. One thing that really stuck out to me was that you can see the explosions and the splashes from planes hitting the ground from an incredible distance. If the plane has rendered in at all, and you can see it from a couple kilometers away or whatever, the effects of it hitting the ground will be rendered in. It is such an immersive feature to have. That draw distance goes above and beyond. Combat989 basically asks about the controls, saying, is the virtual Hotas any good? For me, it feels similar to No Man's Sky and Ultra Wings. It's a bit floaty, it's not the most precise. Some people might love it, it wasn't for me, so I just used the sticks on my Sense controllers, so I could still have virtual hands and interact with stuff when I needed to, but I could be very precise with the sticks, and it supports both, which is good. It is very sim-like though, 100%. It does take a while to learn how each plane flies differently, how much you can push them, how much you can't, which I think is quite rewarding, but it's not the hardest thing to pick up and play. Like, you will be able to jump in and have a fun time. I just recommend maybe flying around in free flight for a bit, which again, I really appreciate that that's in here. If you just want to have a chill time, jump into the test flight and just cruise around for a bit. The areas to fly in are truly massive, and there's a lot to take in there. Magnum Gaming over from Twitter asks, can you land your plane to refill ammo or damage? After each mission, can you land your plane as well? So for my single player playing anyway, it didn't really work like that. The missions either have you spawned in the air or on the ground, so you will have to take off if you spawn on the ground, but most of them end without you having to land your plane again. The original tutorial has you land again, but the majority of missions don't. It is a feature though, and if you really want to, you can just set your plane down anywhere that you want. As for ammo and damage though, I didn't really see any way to repair that. Once you're hit, you hit. That's kind of it. Pit Dog asks if it has UDP telemetry data. The only places I've really seen this in any game is in like F1 and other sim racing, where basically the telemetry of your vehicle gets like transferred over to like a pit wall or a monitor. I didn't see any way to do this in the game, so I'm going to say no. I don't know about Steam though, but sorry, I can't really answer that well, but I'm pretty sure not, but maybe. Don't know. JMH Hasbin and Stuff says, can you turn off the sim elements such as shots piercing oil lines and having to do manual repairs? For people that want this, great. I personally would just like it to be Ace Combat 7-like. Also, is the game Sense controllers only, or can DualSense be used? So, answer this before, DualSense can be used, but as for the sim elements, you can't really adjust this from what I see, but it doesn't have the manual repairs that War Thunder has. So War Thunder, you have your crew, right, if I remember right, and you can actually repair damage mid-flight, but I didn't see any option to do this in Aces. I will say though, if you're in a single player mission or a multiplayer and you get shot down, if you have respawns enabled in multiplayer, you do just respawn, and in single player you just respawn anyway, so you basically have infinite planes in the missions until you fail or you win the mission. So it's not the most punishing there, you can just keep on going and keep on trying, but the damage model I don't think really can be adjusted in terms of difficulty, at least from what I saw in the single player stuff. So the damage model is very realistic, but again, you can just respawn, and the respawn is pretty much instant, but the actual flight model and the damage is not as arcadey as Ace Combat, but it does have some of the elements from War Thunder stripped away, so it is a little bit more approachable. And finally, from James, we have, is it shit? No, James, luckily, it's very, very good. And that wraps us up for today. Thank you so much for watching. This has been quite a hefty review, longer than usual. I hope you've managed to kind of sit down and just take it all in if that's what you wanted from this. It's my privilege to bring you a review for this game. I've been looking forward to it for a very long time, and I hope that I've gotten everything that I can across to you, and any of your fears have been quashed. Maybe some things that would have put you off the game have been realized and you're happy to know about those things, but I hope you've gotten something from this review. If you did enjoy it, feel free to like and subscribe. It just helps out the channel massively, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye bye.